Alright, what is poppin', people? We're here, and I've been meaning to make this video for a few days, but I was just waiting till I actually could work up the mood to really get to it, you feel me? Anyhow, so as most of you are probably aware, we conducted some survey of the NU player base to try to gauge opinions on general things like how fun's the tier, how balanced does it feel, and just some Pokemon and their place in the meta. And for Pokemon, we had Mienshao, Cresselia, Salazzle, Tyrantrum, and then I have Arctivish here, but it was really Snow Warning that we were discussing here. But I think Arctivish is still kind of the face of Hail, so I put it here. And from the results of that test, we obviously had a couple very large things occur. The first and foremost of which is Mienshao. Quick banned. We got rid of this mon, and I think now the opinions on Mienshao and Cresselia were generally the same, and I believe it was mostly just how council felt that made us go, okay, we're banning this and we're gonna test this. Everyone on council pretty much agreed Mienshao was too much for the tier at this point, whereas with Cresselia, I think there were a good bit more of us that said, okay, nah, probably not, but enough people in the community still feel that Cresselia is too problematic, so we probably should still give them the chance to voice their opinion. But why was Mienshao banned? Now, in my eyes, if you use only Scarf Mienshao, I think there is a bit better of a chance for you to view it as balanced. And that's not to say I don't have counter arguments against that, but I do think that this is a much easier set to check. I mean, Mienshao as a whole is still ridiculously strong, right? I think this is 339 or okay, 318. High number. It's really strong. It's got Regenerator. It's got a lot of coverage, utility, you name it. It's got a whole bunch going for it. And the only reason that I think people would probably view Mienshao as not problematic is if this is the set that they have run into the most. And that's because Scarf Mienshao, at the end of the day, is a prediction-reliant revenge killer that does have some pretty discernible counterplay. I mean, if you want to go down the list of Pokemon, you've got things like Comfey, checks it, Cresselia checks it, and is a very good close combat deterrent. You've got ghost types like Dhelmise and Decidueye that can switch into your CCs, Diance's just generally bulky, and that's not, you know, you got a whole bunch of Pokemon down here. You have Mons that can both switch into CC and punish the CC lock. And so I think, oof, my bad. I do think there is still something to say about Scarf Shao, you know, not being some world beater. Now, why do I feel that Mienshao was very evidently broken and needed to go? Well, I think it's more for this set. Life Orb Mienshao does not have good defensive counterplay. And obviously, there's still a decent amount of offensive counterplay, right? You have things like Salazzle that just naturally outspeed. Starmie naturally outspeeds, Talonflame naturally outspeeds, and you still have some Pokemon that could take more than one hit. The problem ended up being that Mienshao's speed put it at such an advantage when it came to a lot of other offensive Pokemon. So you'd have things like, say, Celebi. Okay, let's actually note some viable Pokemon. Things like Decidueye couldn't revenge kill you. Flygon had to be Choice Scarf and you needed chip damage on Mienshao to be able to consistently revenge kill it. Rotom-Mow, it wasn't a great answer to you either. And this is neglecting to mention that Mienshao's insane coverage, and by insane coverage I mean CC knock U-turn on every set, and then you just put like Poison Jab Blast. And that lets you 2-hit KO things like Sylveon and Comfey on the Switch. This is neglecting sets like Swords Dance being incredibly potent and making it really, really easy for Mienshao to just pick one once your immediate switch into it gets any amount of chip that Mienshao needs on it. This Mon was just, in my eyes, way too good at breaking. And if you want to talk about Regenerator, or not Regenerator, I mean, this ability is broken, but not the biggest of our concerns here. You want to talk about Scarf Mienshao, I still think that this set was probably too much for the tier 2. I think it was the healthier of the two, but I think there's an argument that you can make about how Choice Scarf Mienshao quite literally dictated what hyper offense teams were allowed to run if they wanted to be considered viable. Mienshao's combination of speed and power, particularly the speed, made it so you had to have multiple ways of preventing the CC lock. It's the best revenge, or it was, the best revenge killer in the tier. And if you're running hyper offense, obviously, your sweepers, you know, they need to have some way of being shored up against the best cleaner in the tier. And I think Mienshao being able to just invalidate any sort of offense build, not invalidate, but severely inhibit the ability of several setup sweepers, just because of how influential it was as a revenge killer. I don't know if it pushes it into obvious ban territory just on Scarf's merits, but I do think that it warrants more serious consideration as a potentially broken set than it was previously. And now we got Cresselia. Let me just say this. Suspect test. There we go. We got Cresselia getting discussed now a lot more. It's always been getting discussed for the past, like, let's say month and a half. As a potentially overpowered presence in the tier. As I said, it had maybe even a little bit more get rid of it now sentiment in Mienshao, but not enough to where we felt the council's opinions didn't, like, balance it out. I don't know, man. I'm trying to word it to make it not sound like council's just deciding these things, because obviously it's not the case. But again, I think it was like these two were just super similar in terms of where they were ranked overall as broken or whatnot, and it was just council being so much more firmly ban this than they were in Cress. Anyhow, it's getting dealt with. Calm down. But Cresselia has been in the tier ever since we got the massive DLC 2 shift, and once we had banned a good amount of mons, just, you know, that were unreasonably difficult to deal with, Cresselia stepped up, because you've got a mon here. Like, these bulk numbers are kind of unreasonable. You know, you tell someone playing NU in Gen 4 that this is the kind of mon that one day will be considered NU, it's kind of crazy. 120, 120, 130 is incredibly hard for even Pokemon like Tyrantrum, Life Orb Mienshao to get by, just because it's so much raw natural bulk. And Cresselia has very little incentive to EV into anything else. Even now, you can argue that Cresselia can run more bulk than it used to, because it doesn't need the bulk or the speed for Beware. It used to be that you were running, like, I guess you'd still run all the way up here for T-Trum, but you used to want to run this much, and then you'd do this, maybe you put the 20 EVs in special attack for the Pangoro after, I think it was a Spike Moonblast roll, but you do this. My god, my throat keeps getting clogged up. But now, there have been a lot more crests doing this, and getting even more bulk, which obviously makes it even more annoying to deal with, because the mod's just even bulkier now. It becomes harder to pressure. I don't know if that's the right choice, but it's something to note. And it's this combination of just, it's not even really a combination, it's this absurd bulk, combined with Cresselia's ability to just decimate teams late game once it gets, you know, like 3 or 4 Calm Mind boosts under its belt. I think the most successful set, although I hesitate to call it the most common, would be this. Sub-CM with Mono Moonblast, because, you know, Mono Psychic move, I should say. Good, but not ideal. Leaves you as potentially deadweight against a team with literally any dark type. And people, you know, they're not exactly scared to put a Guzzlord on their team right now with how good Ghosts are. And so, you've also seen some adaptation, right? You'll see this occasionally, you'll see things like this, you'll see a Keyberry here, you'll see maybe a Colberberry here. There's a lot that Crest can do to change up, one, its potential to sweep you. You know, again, Keyberry stored power is pretty good. It's also got a good little bit that it can do to change up how the counterplay works to it. With Substitute or Rest, it's a lot safer into status, obviously, but stored power gives it a better time trying to get past something like Copper Raja, which may otherwise be able to get past Crest if it's, you know, an offensively invested Copper. And that pretty much sums up, I think, why people want it banned, right? It's this combination of insane bulk and how that lets it leverage itself into these really favorable positions to get all the Calm Mind boosts that it needs to sweep. And so, what's the anti-ban sentiment? Obviously, I've been a huge anti-ban Cress person the entire time. Why have I been like that? Why am I still like that? Well, for starters, I think that Cresselia's ability to clean games is severely overblown. I think that Cresselia requires an incredible amount of support to get it into a position where it can clean. And a lot of that comes down to two things. Or I guess one thing. The second thing kind of just builds off on this one thing. It's really weak. This is not a Mon that can clean up without several boosts. And compare it to something like, say, Shell Smash Blastoise, which does not need multiple turns to boost and become a threat. It Shell Smashes once, it requires you to immediately respond to it. A lot of the time it requires you to immediately respond to it when it comes onto the field. Something like Cresselia, if you let it come out, you're not immediately going, oh shit, oh fuck, oh shit, oh fuck. What do I do? It's a Mon that, until it takes a while to get out of control. You need to get multiple boosts to where you're actually posing a threat to the opposing team. And so that can, if your opponent for some reason doesn't know their Cress counterplay once they see it on the opposing side, it gives us some time to go, okay, what do I need to try to do here to put myself in position to not lose? Whereas, these more offensively inclined setup sweepers, you're not afforded as much time to think about how you need to handle them. And so that's one. I think the second one as well, and this is a conversation that I always dislike trying to argue because I think it kind of goes circular, but 4 move slot syndrome is very much a thing on Cress. Without stored power, or even Psyshock you could debate, you struggle a lot more in certain matchups to try to break through things, because if you're relying on a move that doesn't even get stabbed, that's pretty unfortunate. And again, I have seen a Cresselia just lose to Copper before. It was Sub-CM, Moonblast, Moonlight, and the Copper was able to stall that out of Moonlight. And Cress couldn't take it out. So you go, okay, I want stored power. Well, okay, what move are you dropping? Because if you drop Moonlight, then Cresselia is, one, worse in earlier bits of the game. As people have noted, it's a Mon that you do need to wait until late game to try to have success with, because you want those checks weakened or removed. So, okay, we're dropping Moonlight, and we're going entirely on late game? Okay, but you're really leaving yourself vulnerable to just being overpowered in the one-on-one. Are we dropping Sub? Because if so, then you're a lot more vulnerable to status. And Pokemon like Toxic Bronzong, Toxic Mantine even, Vaporeon, these are not uncommon. Oh, we're gonna drop Moonlight for rest as well, okay. Have fun giving your opponent multiple turns now to just do whatever they want in front of Cress. There's a give and take, is what I'm getting at, with every moveset adaptation that Cress can try to do to bypass counterplay that is both very common and nigh impossible for Cresselia on its own to get by. And so naturally, the point follows, okay, well, obviously the Cresselia user is going to team build in such a way that they, have a good matchup into these checks. What if I told you the person playing against Cresselia is also allowed to team build in such a way to have a good matchup into Cress? I think that ends up getting ignored much of the time. People just always assume that whoever's using Cresselia is at an inherent team building advantage, which I think is a little weird. These steel types that check Cress, even things like Drapion that check Cress, they get commonly paired with Wish support so that they don't get overwhelmed. Things like a Scavalier, they want Wish support, or even they can run Rest if you really want. But it's not like these Mons are without support themselves. And I think also there are just several ways to shut down Cress that go, they get ignored, they kind of get scoffed at, and I don't know the reason for it, if it's simply just people wanting to ignore counterplay. I think Haze and Taunt end up being the two biggest mentions, and while neither move is particularly, common on its own, when you're looking at Taunt users, it's Drapion and not a whole lot else. If I'm remembering correctly, it might not be. Okay, I'm not going to scroll further in you, but yeah, so you got Taunt Drapion, obviously could run Whirlwind if it really wants to as well. I do think Whirlwind T-Spikes Drapion's pretty good, all things considered. And when you got Haze users, you're going to be looking at Mantine and Vaporeon, both of which can fit it pretty easily on their set. I mean, on Vapo, what, you go Wish Tech all the time, whichever water move you want between Scald and Flip Turn, and then you get Haze. It's not really that hard to fit on. And with Mantine, I saw someone saying in P thread that you drop Defog for Haze. And one, I've never dropped Defog for Haze. I always run Mantine as the Fogger. But even if you do, it's like, okay, so someone else on your team's the Defogger now. I don't really see how that's actually a negative. You can team build, you can use a different Defogger. Just because a mod's normally known for one rule doesn't mean it can't fulfill something else. But I feel like, I don't know, man, it's really weird to see some people just ignore counterplay and just try to brush it aside. There was some other point that I wanted to mention too. Oh yeah, just general meta shifts as well. I don't think favor Cresselia at all, and I think Cresselia has gotten noticeably worse. We've seen a significant surge in ghost types, even ones that were mostly surging just because they could deal with Beware. So like Decidueye is continuing to get high usage. Silvally Ghost we've been seeing more of. Delmise is continuing to be a good Pokemon. And that's in addition to Pokemon like, say, Golisopod that are, you know, all things considered, still pretty reasonable parts of the metagame. And with Leech Life Pod, you do beat Cress. Something like a Scavalier, which also fits the Steel-type mold, but you can lap it in with other bug types, sure. We mentioned it just never loses to Cress. All these things to consider, I can't view Cress as broken. I do think still, on the survey from 1 to 5, I gave it a 3, because I do think it's worth having the discussion over. I still reasonably believe, my interpretation of the 3 score is, could this be broken? And I think the answer is, yeah, it's an S-rank Pokemon. It can be broken. There are very few times, I think, where you look at something that defines the meta, or is at the top of the meta, and you can just go, nope, under no circumstances is this broken. And I don't think Cresselia falls under that. I do think it's worth having to talk over. I don't see it that way. And now next up, Salazzle. This is a mod that, when we first made the VR, I think we had it at A-. Everyone kind of acknowledged that Salazzle was really good. I think at the time there were just a whole bunch of other more pressing threats, and it kind of got ignored. But now Salazzle is A+ rank, and I've seen some people clamor that it could maybe even be S rank. Obviously the S and S rank stands for the Salazzle rank. But I think Salazzle is a mod that we do really need to be paying more attention to. I think Finch even said, he's like, yeah, no, I'd suspect as Salazzle potentially next. And I don't even know if I disagree, because say Cress gets banned, it's like, what else is there that would be pressing to test? Maybe Hail, if you think that it just, you know, it's time to look at how many things have been banned from Hail. I'll get to that later, because I think Mary Annabelle had a really good point there about maybe what the root of all these issues was with Hail adjacent bans. But Salazzle's just ridiculously effective, pretty much, at 2 things. One, just being the most annoying motherfucker to deal with. Corrosion Toxic is so unfun. You think your Jurgalgy is safe, and then it gets poisoned. And just in general, Salazzle's an incredible mon at luring in and crippling these bulky water types like Vapo, like Gastrodon, like Mantine. And while, you know, Vaporeon can run Heal Bell, the others can't. Knockoff Salazzle's also just really good at crippling, generally solid other checks to it. Say something like a Mudsdale maybe, which you also want a Toxic. Something like a Flygon, which you also want a Toxic, but Knockoff is still really good crippling it there. It's super good, essentially, at supporting itself. It's a mon that doesn't require too many outside Pokemon to help it do what it wants to do. And this is ignoring, obviously, Nasty Plot sets. I think in specific, this is the one that I really enjoy. Focus Ash. I really like this one. And maybe this is a little bit worse now with Mienshao gone, although I think if Passimian does rise at all in usage, then it gets a little bit better, because Passimian can run Earthquake. But yeah, Sash NP3 attack Salazzle, I think super good on hyper offense builds. It's obviously great at invalidating revenge colors like Flygon, because if you have your Sash, it can't take you out, and then you Oko with +2 Dragon Pulse. Again, we mentioned Passimian, say that it rises in usage, well, that ain't taking a +2 hit. And even other revenge killers, like maybe Golisopod with Aqua Jet, that's not revenge killing you. Other faster attackers like Inteleon, obviously, they can't deal with you. It's a demon. And I think I gave it a 2 on the survey. I think I probably should have given it a 3 in hindsight, because I do think Salazzle is worth having a discussion over. Ultimately, we decided not to do anything against it for now, and that's because it, alongside Tyrantrum, the scores just weren't very high for, in comparison to like Cress and Mienshao. But going forward, we have our eyes on this. And as I said, going forward, we also have our eyes on T-Trum. We mostly pulled based on the fact that we lost Beware, and to a lesser extent Pangoro. Beware was an incredible check to Tyrantrum, one of the best ways to dissuade spam of Head Smash. And obviously if you look at NU just from a blanket glare, there are maybe 2 good Head Smash switch-ins, Mudsdale and physically defensive Bronzong. I think as of now, not Mantine, Tyrantrum's looked at as more or less fine. It's kind of awkward to build with. Oh, Gastrodon too. Great Head Smash check. It's kind of awkward to build with T-Trum at times though, because it doesn't offer your team a whole lot other than, you know, dummy strong wall breaker. And it's not that fast, but not that slow. You know, the utility kind of stops there. But I do think sheer power that can't be defensively answered too consistently is still something worth, you know, raising. I think I gave it a 1 because I really just don't view it as a problem at the moment, but if some things shift, maybe it becomes more of an issue? I don't know. Also, the only good set's Choice Band. Don't use anything else. Unless Dragon Dance or Hone Claws is fine on HO, I guess. But do not use Scarf. Bad set. And now let's get to Hail. Now, Hail. I don't know, man. I don't think Hail's an issue. But I think there's something to say about Mary Annabelle's argument. And to summarize it, it is the following. And I think this is more or less a verbatim quote from them. How many times do we have to nerf Hail teams before we finally just acknowledge that Hail or Snow Warning is the issue? And I think there is something to take from that. And it's why that on the poll, on the survey, we asked about Snow Warning and not Arctivish. Because if you look at what in-use bans have been related, you know, if you look at some in-use bans, we've banned Aurora Veil, we've banned Arctizolt, and now people are talking up Hail and Arctivish. Now, I don't think Hail teams in their current state are an issue at all, but I think there is something to say about, okay, Snow Warning has enabled things like Arctivish, Arctizolt, and Aurora Veil to even work. Nobody seems to think that manual Hail alongside these mons would be any good. And so, is it really these Pokemon, these moves, that are the issue? Or is it just the ability that lets them function to any degree? And there's also something to say about consistency with bans. I'm going to close this. Not like the alert there. There's something to say about consistency with bans, too. We banned Drought. We banned Drizzle. Why are we not banning Snow Warning? We banned Sandstream at Gen 7 if you want to really get consistent. I think we also banned Drought in Gen 7. Food for thought, food for thought. As of now, if I'm looking at just Hail teams in their current form, I don't view them as broken. But I am very willing to adjust my opinion of should we take action on the ability. It's something to consider. It's something to consider. I think Mary Annabelle makes a really good point. And I do think that when they were making the point earlier in the metagame, I do think it was a little bit less helpful, mostly because of how unpresent Hail was, especially after the Aurora Veil ban. But with these Arctivish teams coming up now, maybe there's something more to say about it. Again, I think a lot of that is contingent on how good do we view Arctivish and Hail teams using it. But hey, we'll see. And we can go over a few winners of like the Mienshao ban. I think again, Hail is a big winner of it. a lot of Hail teams had to dedicate their last 2 team slots pretty much to making sure Mienshao's impact of the game was minimized. Because otherwise you just dealt with a Mon that revenge killed your 2 Slush Rush Pokemon. Mienshao being gone is huge, because now Arctivish doesn't have to worry about that. Now Sandslash doesn't have to worry about that. And hell, go back to the Beware ban even. Beware being gone is a huge boon for them too. And another one that benefits from the Mienshao ban, I think everyone knows. He's back. I've seen some people saying that it's just Theory Mon. I disagree. I think it's pretty, like, evident that Passimian is going to be good. How good? I couldn't tell you. But I think it's pretty evident that Passimian could fill the shoes of at least Scarf Mienshao to a reasonable extent. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm delusional and just living in my Gen 7, you know, past. But I'd like to believe that the Mon with the, 3 similar moves, similar enough attacking power, so it's not like, you're losing a whole bunch of revenge killing potential just because of damage. Speed tier sucks in comparison, but in terms of unboosted threats, you revenge kill the same stuff. So, it's pretty epic. You also revenge kill Adamant Arctivish still, which is kind of helpful. You still force the Slush Rushers to go Jolly if they want to want to outspeed you. So that is helpful. They don't get to just start getting extra damage now. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if Passimian if it actually rises in usage or not, or if it just remains not really used. My guess would be that it rises, if anything, because other Scarfer options in NU. I mean, you got Flygon and Rotom Cut, and you got some fast ones like Talonflame and Inteleon and Starmie. We'll see. That's gonna be it from me here, though. I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll figure out something with this tier going forward. I bet you we will. And if Cresselia gets banned, well, that's gonna be another incredibly large tier shift. I mean, just imagine how good things like Surfetch'd and Machamp would be without Cresselia existing to be a decent check to them. Kind of scary, kind of a scary thought. Until then, though. Well, sometime before then. But until next time, I hope you guys having a good time, and I'll see you then. Peace.